Did it work? Okay, I must say it kind of worked. With that out of the way, you clicked on this video. Let's get straight into it. Bet. So, I'm gonna make sure I can make things relatively brief, just not take as much time from you. So let's talk about cel shading. What is cel shading? Okay, to put it in like the most simplest form, is just like where you just take a random color and then just go right here, take a random color and set the shading with, that particular color that you chose, right? However, there's just a couple of things that you gotta keep in mind to make sure you can make your cel shading to make sense. Yeah, to make sense, And one of those things, let me make sure I can just undo all of this because we'll be going back to the circle later. One of the things that you gotta keep in mind when making cel shading and stuff like that, you probably heard this a bunch of times, but it's very, very important when it comes to cel shading, is that you gotta use the light source to, light and shadow, to establish a light source. So now we're gonna go back to the circle that I previously mentioned. So we're gonna just open up a couple of things right here. And so first and foremost, we gotta establish where the light source is. So we're gonna take it from the top left right here, just to make things a little bit easier, but ignore that arrow right there. So with the light source established, where do you want to put the shadow for the cel shading? You might hear it again a lot of times, but it's always on the opposite direction where the light source is coming, and also taking in mind the shape of what you're shading, of course. So in this case, the light is coming from the top left, so the shading should be down here, bottom right. So let me just highlight that here, bottom right there. So taking that in mind, we're just gonna pretty easily just shade on that direction while also keeping in mind the shape that we are, shading. So in this case, it's a circle. We want to make sure we can get that circular motion going through just like that. And this also will help us out also finding out the dimension of the shape. So instead of being just a plain circle, we've made it now into like some sort of like a very simple sphere. So that is the first step, establishing your light source. And as we previously mentioned about the whole shape and making things three-dimensional, we'll get to that in a bit. But for now, the second step following that is going to be adding details. And what I mean about adding details is sometimes when you're making your line art, the lines are just too strong or just too thick. They just emphasize too much of that detail. And sometimes you want to make like a softer touch to it. So cel shading, those type of details, can actually emphasize those certain points without having to make a whole line art and actually make it too strong for the eye. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, here's a little cloth that I just found out in the Clip Studio Paint materials, just for free or something like that. As you can see, sometimes, okay, yeah, it goes through it. Sometimes, as you can see, the shape of the cloth is going around like too many sections, stuff like that. And sometimes when it comes to clothing, they make some sort of gaps like this, some sort of like very weird gaps and hooks that if you were to just make it in line art like this, it would, not showing a good example, sometimes it can be a bit too much. And with this type of clothing where it's a bit simplistic, you want to keep that simplicity, but at the same time you want to emphasize on that detail. Here is where cel shading takes place. So I'm gonna go along and start shading this piece of cloth. Yeah, I do tend to zoom a lot, just don't worry about that. But I'm gonna go ahead and just start shading the obvious parts. As you can see, the places that the light source is not getting hit. Same example from top left, just make things a little bit easier to show and explain. Just a little gap around here, just so light is not necessarily hitting there. And so as we can see, it doesn't look bad, right? It doesn't actually look that bad. Maybe it's just like another part right here. It doesn't look that bad. However, if you have a very well-trained eye, you can see that there's some sort of like a hook or some sort of like a gap down here, right? And whereas I previously mentioned, if you were to line art it, it would be too much, you know? It would just too much. It would be too heavy for the eye or even for the cloth. But you still want to emphasize it because it's right there. So that's where cell shading takes place. So you're just gonna outline that shape. I'm not gonna, it really depends on you. I'm just gonna make it very simple like this. Downwards. And just a simple line like that. Like so. Just like that. Make it a little bit more round. There you go, something like that. And also over here, right here, it kind of gapes. So we're gonna give 2 lines right there. And as you can see, not the best example, but however, it does convey that little gap or other type of fold on the clothing, all in just cell shading. And that's basically it for cell shading. However, I do have a third step that can help you out a little bit with making things more 3-dimensional instead of just 2-dimensional, and that is the blocking phase, or just straight up making 2D stuff more 3-dimensional, as just mentioned. And essentially in blocking, all you're just doing is just the same thing as in step number 1, which is establishing your light source. But instead of focusing too much on the light source, what you'll be focusing is on the shading itself, using bigger shadings, bigger shapes, instead of actually getting too focused on the details, just to get the fundamentals settled down. And this step can be used in other types of paintings and types of styles. And so for this third step, we're just going to be using the drawing that I just made from last year, just a snippet of a drawing that I made just for this tutorial. And we're going to be using the third point, which is blocking, very heavily in this piece. And so we're going to be doing the same thing that we did previously, like establishing the light source and also just finding the places where details are needed that are not signified with the line art. So in this example, we're going to be using the light source in the opposite direction. Rather than being on the top left, we're going to be using it on the top right. And so by finding the light source, we can start blocking and putting where the shading goes. So the most obvious one, as you can see, will be under here, under the character's neck. So we're just going to be filling that out very, very roughly. As of right now, we don't gotta worry about being too perfect, since, you know, blocking is all about setting the foundation of shading. You can also be a bit very sophisticated with it, but it's sometimes a lot easier and a lot more fun to just rough out your shadows by just winging it, you know? And so we're gonna continue the shading. We can put like shading down here. We can put one around here where the hair is getting covered. We can put around here, just roughing it out behind the ear. Can also put it under here where the bangs are. Speaking of the bangs, we can also go in some areas of the hair, under the hair, just the bangs, like so. We can also go with the hand, give the shape for the knuckles, just like that. Can put some shading under where her belt or her backpack is getting hold on. Sometimes it does create a shadow, so we can just put that there. You can go behind her, the hair, and also around here, because it's also getting blocked by the head itself. A little bit around here, a little bit around here. And just for fun, just like we previously mentioned, all about the details that doing with the liner will be just too much. So maybe with a little bit of shading can work like that, something like that. Under here, because of course casting the shadow. Around here. And also in the eyes. Like so. And so with that, after we sort of roughly block, you know, the shading and all that stuff, maybe we can start refining, like going in here and just like refining a little bit, taking out some of the color that kind of bleeded through, like so, just refining it. And after refining, just teeny bit or maybe even more, you can go even more, but just for the sake of this video, I'm not gonna be refining till the very end, because mind you, I do tend to refine a lot. After that, we can just start putting some of the details, like here on the folds, around the knuckles, sometimes the hands, sometimes create some sort of something like that. Again, I'm still being kind of rough because I just want to just shape out and just put down the shading, you know, around the bangs, some of the on the coat, the fur, I don't know what it's called actually, on the mouth, and sometimes on the nose, you know, on the hair for the volume. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And if you didn't believe me that I actually do tend to refine a lot and stuff like that, I will show you an example that I made before recording this video, just to get the hangs of things like that. I duplicated every single thing and shaded by my own and see how things can work. As you can see, establishing the light source, setting some details like around here to put the shape and the blocking face, like put some shading under here, and in some areas, just to, you know, set the foundation. As you can see later on, I refined it to a very extent. They even gave her some highlights, but that's besides the point. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I was also thinking of just showcasing more and putting more examples with this drawing that I made. I just set up again, duplicated things just for the sake of this video, but I don't know, let me know if you really want me to go into more depth with this drawing in particular. We can go like in stuff like choosing colors and stuff like that, but for now that should do it. Thank you for watching to the very end. If I did help you with these sort of tips and stuff like that, let me know. It's just my first ever tutorial because I want to try out a microphone that I got. But yeah, let me know if it was kind of helpful, if you want to see more tutorials and other tips and tricks that I kind of get on my hands and stuff like that. And yeah, see you later.